A Turkish S-400 just slammed a fire control lock on the USS Donald Cook. We're stuck in the narrowest neck of the Bosphorus with nowhere to turn. Two Russian Su-35S flankers are screaming overhead at Mach 1.5, thumping the ship with supersonic shockwaves. On the Turkish shore, a Bastion P battery is cranking its launch tubes toward our hull. They're prepping a P-800 Onyx. That missile flies at 1,900 miles per hour. From the shore to our bridge, that's a 4-second flight. We're boxed in by an ally and a rival at the same time. The Mark 41 VLS covers are already sliding back and the ship's computer is seconds away from a Ripple fire launch. The Arleigh Burke-class destroyer is pinned in a channel barely wider than a dozen football fields. To the north, Russian jets are diving. To the east, Turkish radars are tracking. This is a synchronized ambush. One twitch on a Turkish firing button and the USS Donald Cook becomes a multi-billion-dollar wreck in the middle of a shipping lane. We are at the climax of a three-way standoff and the first missile is seconds from leaving the rail. The USS Donald Cook didn't just sit there and wait to be a target, we fought back. The captain ordered an immediate electronic attack authorization. The AN/SLQ-32 V6 electronic warfare suite hummed as it pumped out an electromagnetic energy. We were trying to fry the Turkish S-400's receiver. On the shore, the Russian technicians watched their billion-dollar gravestone radar displays turn into a jagged mess. The physical world got just as violent. A Turkish Ada-class corvette, the TCG Heybeliada, suddenly hammered its engines and lunged out from behind a civilian tanker. It charged directly at our starboard bow at over 34 miles per hour in a channel narrower than a suburban street. The USS Donald Cook shuddered as the screws reversed, churning the Bosphorus into foam. The Turkish corvette missed our bow by less than 50 yards, close enough for our bridge team to see the Turkish sailors manning their 76mm OTO Malara deck gun. While we were dodging the ship, our Mark 41 VLS cells were already primed. We had SM-2 interceptors and RIM-116RAM missiles ready to ripple fire. If a single Turkish missile left the rail, the Bosphorus would have turned into a graveyard of burning ships within seconds. To the Russian Su-35S pilots watching from above, it looked like a NATO civil war. They thought Turkey had finally picked a side. Moscow believed Ankara was using the S-400 to harvest our Aegis radar signatures, which they would then relay to Iran to help them shoot down our bombers. That was the cover story Putin used to get his technicians into those Turkish command vans. But Ankara was running a play the Kremlin never saw coming. Turkey was trapped. They had bought the Russian missiles, got kicked out of our F-35 program, and were drowning under US sanctions. They needed a way back into our good graces, and they needed it fast. President Erdogan decided to offer Washington a trade the keys to the S-400's kingdom. This ambush in the Bosphorus was a setup. Turkey intentionally engaged us in a high-intensity radar duel to give us a legal reason to use our most advanced hacking tools. By locking onto the USS Donald Cook, they were opening a digital door. They knew that once we were spiked, our growlers and shipboard systems would aggressively probe their network. The Russian technicians sitting at the consoles thought they were recording us. In reality, the Turkish software had been modified to allow us to vandalize the system and suck out the Russian source code. Turkey wasn't trying to sink us. They were using us as a giant vacuum cleaner to steal Putin's secrets. Russia was the only player at the table who didn't know the deck was stacked. For the veterans watching this, you know the sound of that hard lock alarm. Whether you served on an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer or worked the flight deck of a carrier, you were the one standing between our country and these types of threats. If you were part of the gray hedge of the fleet, or if you have a family member serving on a destroyer today, drop a fair winds in the comments. We want to honor the people who man the rails when the world gets this quiet and this dangerous. The Russian technicians inside the Turkish S-400 vans identified the probe. They realized the American destroyer was not just jamming them, it was invading their kernel-level architecture. The Russian command bypassed the Turkish link and patched directly into the two Su-35S flankers circling overhead. The Su-35S fighters banked hard, pulling 9 Gs, and dove toward our EA-18G Growler flight. The lead flanker toggled its weapon system and unleashed a KH-31P anti-radiation missile. This supersonic Krypton missile was designed to sniff out jamming pods and fly toward them at 2,300 miles per hour. At that speed, the missile covers the distance from the jet to our aircraft in less than 30 seconds. The Growler's cockpit lit up with a launch warning. The pilot slammed the throttles forward into afterburner and dumped a massive cloud of chaff. The Russian missile bit on the decoy, exploding 200 yards behind our wing in a ball of orange fire. The retaliation intensified. While the first flanker engaged the Growlers, the second Russian jet dived toward the USS Donald Cook. It fired two KH-35U anti-ship missiles. These sea skimmers fly just 10 feet above the waves, making them nearly invisible to traditional radar. On the bridge of the USS Donald Cook, the incoming alarm changed pitch to a guttural low-frequency pulse. The ship's Aegis system calculated the intercept in milliseconds. Two RIM-162 evolved Sea Sparrow missiles roared out of the Mark 41 VLS cells at Mach 4. The first ESSM slammed into the leading KH-35U, vaporizing it. The second Russian missile performed a pre-programmed pop-up maneuver to avoid the interceptor missing our superstructure by less than 100 feet and crashing into the Bosphorus with a massive geyser of water. We were in a hot war in a narrow channel. The EA-18G Growler flight was now fighting for survival. One Russian Su-35S was closing the gap, maneuvering to reach cannon range where electronic jamming becomes a secondary concern. The Russian pilot used the high thrust-to-weight ratio of his engines to stick to the blind spot of the American sensors, prepping an R-73 infrared-guided missile. This heat seeker tracks the literal fire coming out of an engine. The lead Growler did not break away. Instead, it pulled the nose up to bleed speed and activated the ALQ-218 Tactical Jamming Receiver's narrow band mode. Every move a modern fighter makes is processed by a computer before the wings actually move. By hitting the Su-35S with a concentrated burst of high-energy radio waves at a specific frequency, the American jet caused a momentary logic failure in the Russians' flight computer. The flanker's elevators glitched and its nose dipped violently toward the water, shattering the pilot's aim. The window for a counter-strike opened. The wingman rolled the Growler inverted and fired an AIM-12OD-AM ROI-AM. This is a fire-and-forget weapon that travels at nearly 3,000 miles per hour faster than a high-powered rifle bullet. The Russian pilot fought the controls, regained authority, and dove for the mountains while dumping a cascade of magnesium flares. He pulled a Cobra maneuver, standing the jet on its tail to shed hundreds of miles per hour in a single heartbeat. The Emir-AM missed the cockpit by less than 10 feet, detonating against the Turkish hillside in a massive pillar of fire and rock. We were hunting the hunters. The USS Donald Cook reached the tightest point of the Bosphorus. The Turkish S-400 was still attempting to reboot, but the Russian technicians were now struggling with a Turkish firewall that had been intentionally left open for our exploit. The Growlers and the shipboard EW suite synchronized a transmission. It was a ghost kernel, a piece of self-replicating code disguised as a standard system update from the Russian manufacturer. Inside the S-400 vans, the screens went dead. When the screens returned, they were navy blue. The white anchor of the U.S. Navy sat in the center of the Russian displays. The anchor protocol also hijacked the S-400 search radar, turning it into a beacon that broadcasted its own GPS coordinates on an unencrypted civilian frequency. It was essentially telling the world it was defenseless. For 15 minutes, every Russian asset in the Black Sea went blind. The Su-35S pilots lost their data links and their cockpits filled with system failure warnings. The Bastion P coastal batteries lost their targeting solutions. The entire kill chain was severed. We had stolen the soul of the machine. While the enemy was distracted by the anchored screens, the real mission began. From the deck of the USS Donald Cook, 4 RQ-21, Blackjack reconnaissance drones were launched. These small carbon fiber drones are nearly invisible to radar. With the S-400 net down, they crossed the Black Sea at wave-top height, heading for a secret Russian annex in Crimea. As the drones crossed the coastline, a local Pantsir S-1 air defense system, a truck-mounted unit with twin 30mm cannons detected them. The Pantsir operator opened fire, sending a stream of tracers into the night sky. One drone performed a pre-programmed jink to avoid the fire. The Russian operator fired a 9M335 missile, but without the support of the main radar net, the missile detonated 50 yards wide. The drones reached the facility and the thermal cameras zoomed in on the loading docks. We found a missile-in-a-box system where Russian personnel were loading Fateh 110 ballistic missiles into shipping containers marked with humanitarian aid logos. We captured the serial numbers of the crates containing 3 M22 Zircon hypersonic components. One drone was lost to a burst of 30mm fire on the way out, but the data was already transmitted back to the USS Donald Cook. We had proof that Russia was using aid shipments to turn Iran into a hypersonic launch pad. The Anchor protocol had a secondary effect. Because the Iranian air defense network was linked to the Turkish S-400 via a Russian satellite, the code traveled through the link and hit Tehran's command center. In Iran, the S-300 batteries and the indigenous Bavar 373 systems experienced the same blue screen failure. The Iranian commanders thought they were being protected by a Russian shield, but they were looking at the U.S. Navy Anchor. A flight of US F-15E Strike Eagles and Israeli F-35I Adirs crossed the Iranian border at 30,000 feet. The Iranian radars were dead. Every time they tried to restart the systems, the code triggered a failsafe that deleted the BIOS. Our Strike Eagles targeted the convoys we had tracked from Crimea. They released GBU-31 DAM bombs. The explosions were massive as the rocket engines inside the trucks triggered secondary blasts that leveled the staging area. One Iranian Tor M2 battery managed to fire a single 9M331 missile using its backup optical track. The American pilot deployed a towed decoy, which the missile destroyed while the jet remained untouched. Within 20 minutes, the secret hypersonic pipeline was a line of burning craters. The USS Donald Cook cleared the Bosphorus and entered the open Black Sea. The 15-minute timer on the S-400 hit zero and the Russian screens flickered back to life, but the damage was done. The drones were gone, the Iranian base was destroyed, and the secret was out. The ship moved into the deep water, its mission completed. We had avoided a kinetic war with an ally, but exposed a betrayal that would change the alliance forever. The S-400, a system Russia claimed was invincible, had been defeated by a piece of software and a single American jet. The USS Donald Cook continued its patrol, its radar scanning the horizon. The crew remained at general quarters. In these waters, the distance between peace and war is only as wide as a digital signal. We had held the line in the most dangerous bottleneck on Earth, proving that the Navy does not just protect the seas we own, the information that governs them. As the Russians and Iranians sifted through the wreckage of their systems, they were left with a haunting realization: we were already gone. Disclaimer: we respect the truth, and this video is our way of dramatizing a real event to give the audience a detailed look of what happened. However, some elements in this video also present a hypothetical scenario and are not a factual report of real events. All dialogues and character emotions depicted are fictional, based on publicly available information about real-world military capabilities and geopolitical tensions. Thank you.